Scream is certainly an interesting entry into slasher movies. Obviously, it has become famous now for subverting certain aspects of its own genre, but that's actually not the reason I find it interesting. In fact, the reason I find Scream to be interesting is because the worst part of it are the obvious ways it attempts to subvert its own genre, while the best parts of it are the points where it simply embraces the genre it holds in such contempt. Why? Well, let's get into it. The way that Scream tries to subvert its own genre is simple. While most of these movies seem to exist in a universe where the characters have never seen a slasher movie before, most of the characters in Scream have, and this leaves the characters open to comment on any supposed cliches of the genre wherever they appear in the movie. Now, while this sounds like a great way to subvert its own genre, in execution the movie is a little bit sloppy. Instead of the movie commenting on such tropes in a creative way, most of this supposed commentary comes from characters literally saying, "Huh, isn't it funny how a lot of slasher movies repeat this certain element?" As a result of this, the movie feels like it's just beating you over the head with its supposed commentary in horror films. There is a reason why the first rule of any film class is simply show don't tell, and this movie, unfortunately, is a bad example of this rule. Furthermore, its commentary seems to suggest that if characters in these types of movies had simply seen one of these types of movies, that they would be able to fare much better than their prototypical slasher equivalents. However, the reason that people in these types of movies fare so poorly in regards to their decision-making is simply that they act like complete idiots, as the hack screenwriters who wrote them can't seem to think of more creative and understandable ways that would lead the characters to their eventual demise. This is something I thought Cabin in the Woods did quite a bit better, because when characters in Cabin in the Woods act like complete idiots, it's because the people behind the scenes, who are a clear metaphor for the writers behind the movie, are coercing them to do so because, without getting too much into spoilers for that movie, they are required to do so in order to appease certain people, who are a clear metaphor for the audience. To be fair, there are a couple moments in the movie that work as a subversion of the genre. For instance, I thought it was clever when they were looking at the TV in the news van and yelling, "Look behind you!" Mainly because the scene had a setup and a payoff and didn't simply have characters explaining how clever the movie is to you. Also, apparently when the movie came out, Drew Barrymore's performance was heavily marketed, only to have her die within the first 10 minutes, which is kinda genius if you ask me. But unfortunately, these brief glimpses at creativity simply were enough to make up for the movie's surface-level attempt at subversion. So, what did I actually like about the movie? Well, like I said, most of the elements I did like were those that were typical of the genre. I thought there was an acceptable level of creativity that went into most of the kills in the movie. The whole opening scene with Drew Barrymore, again, was pretty creative. While it's hard to pin down all the particular elements that make it great, it did get me invested in what the movie had to offer next. I guess you could argue whether they deliver on that initial investment, and I clearly am, but it certainly works as a standalone scene. The garage door scene was also pretty great, particularly in the way they set up all the particular elements in the scene, such as the beer bottles, the switch for the garage door, and the doggy door, along with how they all eventually pay off. A few of the other deaths are just kinda stabby stab then run away, but overall the kills are acceptable. While I will admit that some of the connecting elements of the script were just kinda bland, like that whole subplot about her losing her virginity was just kind of boring and didn't really serve much of a purpose. At least they put effort into some of the kills, which is why most people go to see these movies anyways. So I guess I should sum up by saying whether I recommend this movie, and the answer is maybe, I guess. I did genuinely enjoy the kills and a few other elements of this movie, but it seems a little too few and far between to recommend in its own right. Plus, it's hard to recommend a movie too strongly when the big thing about it is the way it subverts the genre, when I personally think it just does a so-so job of it. Maybe if you can stream it on Netflix, watch it on TV, or get it from a friend, it would be serviceable. But overall, I'm just not sure if it's quite the horror classic that everyone has made it out to be. Thanks for watching!